You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
How do you do, buckaroos, and welcome to Comics with My Kids podcast, official podcast for the comicscornerbox.blogspot.com. I am your host, Matt D, and with me today is
Logan D.
Today we're stepping out from our normal routine and looking at an actual prose novel and a movie. Logan, can you tell the audience what novel and movie we're talking about today?
Call of the Wild by Jack London. Would you like to say what the movie version is?
And the movie is the version that came out a couple of years ago with Harrison Ford, a.k.a. Han Solo, Indiana Jones, Jack Ryan.
Cheesy burrito?
What? No. Okay, Logan, well, why did you choose Call of the Wild as our book today?
So, for school, I had to read it, and I actually kind of enjoyed it, and so I thought, hey, we need a book to podcast on, so I chose that.
What made you interested in Call of the Wild?
Mom has been watching this show, called Life Below Zero, and I thought this book reminded me a lot of it.
Well, then let's go ahead and dive into the story. What can you tell me about the story synopsis or summary for Call of the Wild?
So, in the book, Buck is the main character. He's a dog, and and his owner is a man named Judge Miller. One night, the gardener takes Buck and brings him down to the train station and sells him because the gardener has gambling problems. And he needed money. So once after he had sold them, Buck gets pretty much tortured because all the other people are afraid of him because he's a big dog, and they didn't feed him or give him water.
Okay. Now, let's back up a little bit. So you said that he was sold. Was he stolen from the judge? I mean, because did the judge sign off and say, oh yeah, you can sell my dog?
No. The gardener stole the dog and sold him.
All right, so now Buck is in captivity, and you said he went to the train station. Where did he go?
He was taken to this one man that they call Red Sweater. Any ideas why they call him Red Sweater?
Does he wear a red sweater?
Yeah. And he basically just beats dogs into punishment.
Okay.
And he learns there the law of the club and fang.
Who's he?
Buck.
Okay. Don't forget to say the name every once in a while, okay? Because, I mean, if we get into the story, there's several different characters. You keep using the pronouns, it's going to be hard to follow who's who and which character is doing what. All right, so how much would you say... So after that he's taken and learns about the club and the Fang, what happens next? How do we get to the Call of the Wild story? What's the meat of the story?
Well, Red Sweater then sells him off to a mailing company, or two people who do mail runs, Francois and Perrault, and he has a long run there, but then, they sell him to a different owners named Hall. Well, the one owner's named Hall, and then his sister and his brother-in-law is there, and they're terrible at keeping dogs, and so they run them too hard and have too heavy of a load. Then,
well, what do you mean run them too hard? Too heavy a load?
I mean,
what's Buck doing?
So Buck is the lead sled dog. Then Hall uses the entire team as the sled dog team, and they have them run for way longer than they would on the mail route with way heavier load.
Like the Iditarod?
No. Well, basically, it's like doing the Iditarod, but with bricks in your thing.
Gotcha.
And there was only 7 dogs originally, but then they added more dogs to the team. But here's the problem. Those dogs eat more, and Hall didn't even pack enough for the dogs that were already there.
I see.
So they went from 7 to 14, So there's 14 dogs, and those dogs eat more. So it's like the Iditarod. You're running it with bricks, and on top of all that, there's half the checkpoints.
I gotcha. So then, so Hall's hauling all this stuff. Where's he going?
It never really says where he's going, but he is going quite far. And then at one point, they run up to this camp of a guy named... Oh, I couldn't think of his name. John Thornton. They run up to his camp, and he was left there by his team because he was hurt. John Thornton's a man. And so they came up upon him. John Thornton attacked Hall and saved Buck. And then Hall was like, hey, we don't need them. And they went off without them. And then the ice broke beneath their feet, and they died.
Who's they?
Hall died. The brother-in-law and the sister died, and all the other dogs except for Buck.
I see.
So now we're with Buck, John Thornton, waiting for his team to come back.
Okay.
And so Buck gets to heal, and so does John Thornton. Oh, I forgot to mention something.
What's that?
So before this, they had run it completely out of food. They had
Who's they? Who ran completely out of food?
Buck and Paul of those group.
Okay.
They ran completely out of food, killed 6 of the 14 dogs, all the new ones, all but one new one. Paul's brother-in-law traded off his revolver, which he used to kill them, to get some frozen horse meat, which was terrible for the dogs on their stomach. Then he ended up killing the last one, but with a club. So now Buck is in really bad shape. He's underfed, overdriven, and still has that super heavy load.
Gotcha. But now he's been saved
by John Thornton.
And John Thornton now has him. So what's John Thornton doing with Buck?
So they both heal up quite a bit. Then John Thornton's team comes back. The team consists of 2 dogs, now 3, 3 men, 2 had left.
What do you mean, 3 men and 2 heads left?
So 3 counting John Thornton.
So there was 5 initially?
No, there was 3 initially, then 2 left, and now those 2 came back.
Okay, so now what was John doing then? He saved Buck, but what's his purpose of being up in Alaska, up in the Yukon?
So John Thornton was now I can't remember exactly why he was there. I think he was there oh wait, I remember now. I forgot to say one important thing about the setting of why the gardeners sold Buck now was the gold rush was going on.
Okay.
And so dogs are selling for a lot.
Okay. Because they need dogs to run sled teams and do work up there?
Yeah.
Okay. And so then what is John Thornton doing up there then? Is he a prospector?
He's there for gold.
That's what a prospector does. He digs for gold.
Yeah. And so he had gotten hurt, and that's why he was left there. But now his entire team is all back together, plus Buck, and so now they go off to try and find some gold.
Okay. Well, let's take a look a little bit at the story then. So how much does Jack London describe the Yukon area as you read the book?
Well, they're mostly in the Yukon.
Yeah, that's why I said, how does he describe the Yukon area?
He describes various parts that it's a long journey around there, and the cities are very far apart.
Mm-hmm. What about the scenes? I mean, the scenery. What does it look like? How does he describe it? What goes through your mind as you're reading about the Yukon?
They're running through a forest full of snow, and you can also see some rabbits.
Okay. Well, what about the temperature? How does he describe the temperature?
At some points during like blizzards, super cold because it's a blizzard.
Right.
But generally all around, the dogs are fine because they have thick woolen coats.
Okay. How do the dogs sleep at night since it's so cold?
They dig little snow caves and go in.
Okay. And how does Jack London best describe some of that to you? I mean, as you're reading the story, what do you feel when you read about the cold? Do you feel cold yourself?
No.
Does he paint the picture to kind of describe in your mind what's going on?
Well, yeah, I think of the cold, but I don't actually get cold.
Okay.
Why would I get cold thinking of being cold?
Well, I was just say that's the whole part of having a good writer, like in this case, Jack London. He kind of describes the scenes for you a little bit. Really gives descriptive narrations to what the cold is like and how much snow there is, and how Buck has to dig into these little caves to make a place to sleep. And sometimes he didn't even not know how to do that at first, and the first time he did it, he kind of dug into something or somebody or another dog.
Oh no, what had happened is he saw one dog dig in, so he tried to replicate that by a tree, but as he dug down, he found a different dog.
Okay.
And so then he just dug down and made his own snow cave.
Gotcha. So, what does the author say about Buck learning to be a sled dog?
Throughout the story, all his senses sharpen and get stronger, and you can tell the difference. He went from a lazy lay around the house dog to a tough dog who could probably be the lead dog for the Iditarod.
Okay. What's one of Buck's first trips as a sled dog?
He was a mail deliverer.
Right.
For Francois and Perrault.
It's pronounced Francois. But what's some of the things that Buck did when he first started out as a sled dog? I mean, he didn't just put on the harness and just take off and knew what he was doing. How did he pick up some of this stuff along the way?
He was started off towards the back, and he saw what the other dogs were doing and tried to learn off of them.
Okay, so he was mimicking their behavior, and he was able to move up along the ranks then?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say that without the
Yes.
grunts? All right, thank you.
And eventually he got so strong, he challenged the leader in a fight to the death, barely won, and then ended up and then the entire team of dogs ate the leader.
You mean Buck's team or another team of dogs?
Buck's team.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that the dogs were so starved that they would eat another dog.
Well, that's like the treat for them. If it's a battle to the death, then all the dogs gather around, and if the dog stays down for too long, they'll go in and either finish him off and eat him, or just eat him.
Wow, that's pretty violent. So, who are the most important characters in the story of The Call of the Wild?
Buck, team of dogs, and John.
Okay.
Thornton.
Tell me a little bit about John Thornton. What's he like?
He's a nice man who loves Buck. And Buck loves him. It's like Buck is his favorite dog, as it seems, and Thornton is Buck's favorite human. He would do anything for him.
Gotcha. Well, how do they build that friendship up? I mean, is there anything in the book that kind of explains how they became such fast friends, why he likes Buck so much, and why Buck likes John?
When it doesn't really say, it was more like when he met him, they became best friends.
Well, you can't just walk into a room and make best friends with somebody. You have to, some stuff has to happen. When it comes to humans, we talk to each other and we get to understand each other. But with animals, it's a little different. They kind of see what we do and how we act.
Yeah, and he saved, one of the main things is he saved Buck's life.
Okay, there you go. See, he saved Buck's life. So Buck immediately could trust him. And they developed
a relationship.
A relationship together, yeah. So, what character do you think you could see yourself as in the story?
Buck.
Buck, okay. Why do you see yourself as Buck in the story?
Well, because he runs a lot, and he likes to run.
Gotcha. I would think...
And he can go long distances.
Right. I would think because as you're reading the story is kind of told from his point of view, so you can kind of relate to the character. Because it's talking all about him and the stuff that he sees and does. At least that's how I felt when I was reading the story. So, if you live in the Yukon, what job do you think you would like?
I'd like to be a sled dog.
A sled dog?
Your job is to run and eat.
Gotcha. I wouldn't mind being one of the mail carriers, the guy that's leading the sled dog to saying, hup, hup.
Well,
Sure. So, what part of the story really sticks with you? Every time you think it's Call of the Wild, what kind of stands out? What scene or what part of the book?
nothing really comes to my mind at first. Except for, actually it's more back with, Francois and Perrault.
Mm-hmm.
I just always think of them running through the forest on one of the Yukon trails.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. I have to say, my memories of this book, what stands out the most to me would be the sled dog, the sled team going along the Yukon, having to go over all the hills and through the snow and camping down over the night. And then at one point, wasn't there a pack of wild dogs that came in that Buck had to fight with the rest of his team?
Everybody fought against the 7 wild puppies.
Yeah,
or not the 7, the savage wild puppies.
Yeah. So when I think of Call of the Wild, I think of cold. I think of this very hostile environment and having to live through that. So
and also when I think of Buck and his team running along the Yukon, I always think of Buck as this big, strong dog.
Yeah.
Because he's part Bernard, part German Shepherd.
Oh, that's a pretty big dog, that St. Bernard. Well, after reading this book, Logan, would you read other novels by Jack London?
Maybe.
Okay. Because I know there's White Fang, which is also about a sled dog team. And there was another one I can't think of off the top of my head. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and give the book a rating system of buy, borrow, or forget about it. What would you rate this book?
I'd say borrow. I love the book, but it's very long, and I can't see myself reading it multiple times.
Gotcha. Well, I think I'm in the category of borrow as well. It's a good book to read every once in a while. Pick it up, especially it tends to be like a homework assignment, but it's definitely a classic novel. I would pick it up in the library, maybe read it once every 2-3 years or something to that effect. So yeah, I would say a borrow. All right. Well, so you read Call of the Wild, and then you rewatched the movie from 2018, I want to say, or was it 2020?
2020.
With Harrison Ford playing the role of John Thornton. Now, for the most part, the story kind of follows the same suit,
Yeah, he gets stolen by someone.
Buck gets
sold off.
Buck gets stolen. He gets sold. He heads up to the Yukon. He gets bought by Francois and Perrault, and he starts off on a mail run, and then a little fuzzy to me, but at some point he does run into Jack Thornton. John Thornton. Where does the story kind of diverge for you from the book to the movie?
Well, in this one, John Thornton had met with him very early on, met up with him multiple times, and then he came to Buck, saved Buck, and then Hall and his team actually survived.
Okay.
And the dog.
Now, Hall and his team, how do they differ in the movie? Don't we first see them in a car heading off to some lake or something?
In a car?
Yeah, because wasn't there a scene with Karen Gillan shows up, the girl that plays Nebula and Amy Pond?
Yeah.
Isn't she Hall's brother's fiance? Sister? Okay.
Hall's sister.
Okay. So how does their story with that how is that different than the actual novel?
How is it different? Well, in this one, Hall survives, and then later he comes back at John Thornton, and he ends up killing John Thornton. Where in the book, Hall died, and John Thornton gets killed by this tribe of Indians that Buck kills most of.
Okay. So, what would you think was better, the book or the movie?
That would be hard. I think I'll go with the book, but I did really like how they did Buck. They didn't use an actual dog. They used this, like, giant animation of a dog.
Right, he was CGI'd in the movie.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I really enjoyed the movie, but yeah, the book is definitely far, far superior, like with a lot of movies. Movies versus the book. But, if you don't want to sit and, read through the slog of the classic novel, I would say The Call of the Wild from 2020, starring Harrison Ford, is definitely a close proximity to what the book was trying to tell you. And they definitely captured a lot of the feeling of cold up in the Yukon and how things were back in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the gold rush.
And you could probably you could watch the movie and the book and give us your opinion.
Yeah, you could.
Right?
Yep. You could email the show and let us know what you think of Call of the Wild, whether it's the movie, the book, or anything like that. All right, Logan, well, is there anything else you want to add about Call of the Wild?
Well, the one thing about Call of the Wild that it reminded me of is Call of the Wild was a lot like Black Beauty.
Why is that?
Black Beauty is about a horse who gets sold from owner to owner, like Buck, has some good, like Buck, some bad, like Buck, and for the bad, they get treated very poorly, like Buck. But Black Beauty doesn't have a team. But just like Buck, Black Beauty is the finest of them all.
I see. I can see the similarities, so I think that's about it. So thanks, folks, for listening to this episode of Comics with My Kids podcast. Check out more episodes at the comicscornerbox.blogspot.com, where we normally talk about comic books.
Leave us a rating and review at Apple Podcasts or Podchaser.
Follow us on Twitter for all of our episode posts and news at Comics with Kids.
Also, check out our Facebook page, Comics with My Kids, and Instagram.
Thanks, and have a great night.
Or morning.
Two, one.
Hey, do you need these batteries?
Yeah, they need to say that. That's why I have that over there so I don't lose that. All right. Here we go. Ready?